So we are so fortunate with the talent that we have in our house band. Thank you, Olivia. And I just have to point out, we have this big bass here, and then right over there is a little ukulele. It looks like Baby and Big Papa over here. So this month, we are observing what it means to be an instrument of God. And over the last couple of weeks, we talked about being a fine-tuned instrument, and how important that is. That you could be the best pianist in the world, but if your piano's out of tune, it doesn't work. So we talked about being willing to step up and be present and do what we need to do to change consciousness, to be that instrument. The truth is that when we answer the call from a deep level, I think we automatically become instruments of God, because it's not coming from the ego, it's coming from a higher place. And this is when we are who we are called to be and recognize that it's bigger than just us, that there is a higher calling that is unfolding. And just like we sang earlier, you are the hands, you are the voice, you are the heart of spirit on earth, as Karen Drucker said in her song, that this is what we are affirming today, that we are the voices, the hearts, the hands, the minds of spirit. So I wanted to look at some of the steps that we take as we unfold spiritually, and they're outlined in the front of your bulletin. To me, by me, through me, and as me. And this actually came from Michael Beckwith and Marcia Sutton, and Mary Omwake presented it at our regional conference. But when we are, not on the spiritual path just yet, some of the first steps that we take is that we may believe that life happens to me, that life happens to us. Before we discover spiritual principles, it just seems like things are random and, we don't have any control over them. We may, when we're in this place, feel powerless. We may feel victimized, and we may believe that there is nothing that we can do. Because isn't that how it feels when you're feeling powerless and victimized? You're like, there's nothing I can do about this. And the truth is that some people spend their lives in this place. Know anybody who lives in the victim consciousness of feeling that the world is happening to them and not by them or through them? And of course, there's nobody in this room that has that kind of experience, right? And the truth is, it's not like we go through stage 1 and then we're in stage 2 and then we're in stage 3. We're always moving back and forth between the different ones. So in the victim consciousness, there sometimes is no connection between our thoughts, what we're thinking, the words that we're speaking, and not getting that there's a connection there. And when we're in this place, or when someone is in this place, we can complain, we can whine, but nothing really changes. And in this consciousness, also, blaming is huge. So we blame our parents. I wouldn't be like this if it wasn't for my parents, or if it wasn't for my school or the country or whatever. And the truth is that on some level, and at some point in all of our lives, most of us have probably been victimized at some point or other, some more severely than others. And yet, we need to move beyond that in order to make a shift. Byron Katie said it this way, because when we're in that place, we feel like we have no control and there's no responsibility on our part. But Byron Katie said this: as long as you think that the cause of your problem is out there, and as long as you think that anyone or anything is responsible for your suffering, that situation is hopeless. And it means that we are forever in the role of victim, and that you're suffering in paradise. I like that idea of suffering in paradise, because truthfully, we're living in a paradise, right? But if we're not seeing it, then it's not the experience that we're having. So we may approach life as a beginning as to me. All these things are happening to me, and I can't control this, I can't do anything about it. And then we begin to awaken. We start down the spiritual path and we start to look at life a little bit differently. no longer a victim of circumstances. We can take things into our own hands, and we begin to work with our thoughts and our words and manifestation. So rather than life happening to me, life then is happening by me. Now, I remember when I first got into New Thought and spiritual teachings, my first book was a book called Thought Power by Swami Shivananda. And he talked about how our thoughts have weight and color and texture, and there's this whole experience around them. And it was my first introduction to the idea of, really? You mean my thoughts and my words affect my reality? And it was a real eye-opener and a real shocker for me at the time. And so we moved then from life is happening to me, that I can affect my life. I can affect this world. And so we don't have to put up with unhealthy situations. We can take responsibility for our actions. And I've shared this example before, but it's for me, it has really struck, and that is the law of mind action in unity is thoughts held in mind produce after our kind, and we attract to us that which we are. It's kind of a basic principle. And I used to see it very clearly when I served as a wedding coordinator at Unity Village. And so on Friday nights, we would do the wedding rehearsals, and sometimes I'd have, 2 wedding rehearsals in the evening, because then I'd have 2 weddings during the day that I was coordinating. And what I noticed was that the wedding party, if the wedding party was kind and considerate and generous, well, guess what? The next day, we could multiply that kindness and generosity by 200 or 300 or however many guests there were. I found that if I had a group of people and they were difficult and they were complaining and they were whining, guess what? The next day, there were 200 people of the same kind of consciousness, and it made it so clear to me of how we attract that which we are, that we are drawn to people who are like us and who think like us. So by me, then, the world is by me. I'm using my prayers, I'm using my visualization, my goal setting, I'm watching my thoughts, I'm watching my words, and so it becomes the world of manifestation. And so we focus on manifesting prosperity in our lives and abundance, the right work, the right relationship, and this is a valid step on the spiritual path because we need to take care of our material needs, yeah? We need to take care of those things, and this helps take care of the basics in life. However, if we merely stay in by me, it becomes an act of will. And maybe personal will, not divine will. It can become an act of personal will. It can become an act of the ego, and it can become exhausting because we have to do it all ourselves. We have to focus. And then we discover that, maybe we can't manifest every little thing in the world. Right? Have you ever, we've all run across that. I remember when I was new, it was like, all I have to do is think about it and visualize it and it'll manifest. And, sometimes that happened and sometimes it didn't. And Charles Fillmore would call this, say that we are a part of a greater, he called it race consciousness. We call it today the collective consciousness, that we are affected by each other. And then, so we're on this path and we're manifesting and we're visualizing, and the truth is that sometimes we hit a wall. Yeah? Sometimes you pray for that healing and it doesn't happen. Or sometimes you're doing everything right. You're watching your thoughts and your words and you're meditating and you're praying, and then, hey, all of a sudden you lose your job or there's a diagnosis of an illness. And it's like, well, what was that and what happened? Because the truth is we're all a part of this dance, and none of us has got the total, complete power and control that we may have thought that we did. I remember in 97 when I was very ill and I was teetering on living and dying. And I remember before I was going to have surgery, and I remember just before they put me out, they were kind of like, well, I knew that. I remember thinking, well, I can't die because I got a wedding tomorrow and I got to do a wedding. And then I heard this voice that says, you're not doing the wedding, so forget about it. And it's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, but wait a minute, I can't die. I have children to raise. And then I very clearly heard a voice that said, that's not your choice. That is not your choice. And it was a big awakening to me of letting go and thinking, oh, I had all this control and power, and no, I didn't. And, luckily I woke up, but, it's that moment of just total surrender and releasing and giving over. So sometimes we hit that wall, and then we're like, okay, so this by me is good. It's okay, but not always working. And I think that it is then that we begin to make the shift to through me. So instead of like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to manifest this, it's I'm opening to the bigger picture. I'm opening to the presence of God, and I'm saying, here are my hands, here's my voice, here's my mind, and here's my heart. Use me. I surrender to you. I give it all over to God. And then we become a conduit, and we become, and it's more like moving energy. So it becomes more like Tai Chi, where we're moving energy rather than we're forcing it. And when it's through us, we can listen to the direction that it's moving and where it's moving, and we can cooperate with us. Jesus said it this way. He said, the words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work. So Jesus was very clear that he was of the essence of allowing the Spirit to move through him, that he wasn't speaking, that it was the Spirit of God who was speaking through him. Every morning on Sunday, when we gather together for our prayer at 8:30, we affirm, it is not I, but the Spirit of God who serves through me. And so it's that conscious, and I think it's important sometimes to do it consciously and say, God, I surrender and I give this over to you, and let it be. So how does this show up in the grander scheme of things? How does this show up in life? Because we can look at our own lives and say, okay, I know there are moments when I feel like everything is happening to me. And then there are moments when I feel like, boy, I'm just pushing it by me. And then I also there are times when it's moving through me. But on a bigger scale, I want to look today at a couple of events because they're up in the news right now. And one is we're having our Pride Parade today, and we had the vote by the Supreme Court that struck down a key provision of the federal law defining marriage as a union between a man and a woman. So, we've legalized same-sex marriage by states, and now it will hold. And so this is a big moment. There's some big things that are happening in the world and some big changes. But when I look at it from the level of gay rights, I wonder how many people were victimized because they were gay for decades, for centuries, right? I mean, how much of that is a part of that experience? And yet at some point, when the world is happening to me, there was a shift to say, you know what, enough is enough, and we're going to approach life as to by me. And then things began to change. We had parades. We had people coming together. We had, Desi has served on the on a committee that has been helping to change the laws and to move things forward. And so the by me, the coming together and to taking action and to say, I'm going to do something. And then I think one of the things that happens, particularly when we're at an issue of something that is higher than us, that's for all people, there's a through me that begins to happen. And it's a through me that happens individually, but it's a through me that happens collectively as a community and as a nation and as a world, and it starts kind of taking on a life of its own, as we have seen in the culmination of the Supreme Court decision this week. Another example, and another person in the news, for whatever your feelings are about him, is Edward Snowden. He's the CIA guy who's been leaking all the documents about how the government is, listening in and preparing to do even more of it. And I was watching an interview with Glenn Greenwald, who's the journalist who talked to Edward Snowden, and he said, he started to hear from him and get this stuff and documents and things, and he didn't know who he was. He said, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know anything about him. But just everything that I heard from emails and things, I assumed the guy was in his 60s. And I assumed he was in his 60s because the thing that he was doing was so big and illegal that he could spend the rest of his life in jail, if not worse, because he's being called a traitor. And he said, well, the guy must be at least in his 60s. So, he feels like, okay, I can give this back to the world now because, I have lived most of my life. And Glenn Greenwald said he was shocked when he actually met him and found out that he was only 29 years old. He's 29 years old, and he had a girlfriend that he'd been in a relationship with in Hawaii, and he had to give her up, and he basically has had to give up his life. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's not like he didn't have anything to sacrifice. And he said he couldn't do anything else, that his conscience was calling him to a different place. And Glenn Greenwald said that what is catchy is the courage. The courage that this young man has is giving him the courage to speak out. And so his message was to do that. And what I see is moving from, even on a national level, from being a victim and saying, well, there's nothing we can do about this. This is, too big. Whatever this is, this just happens to be the example at the moment, but whatever it is, the global climate change, whatever the big issue is there's nothing we can do about it, is a to me victim consciousness, yeah? But a by me is speaking out, becoming informed, and doing what is mine to do. Recognizing that as we take the step in by me, that particularly if it's a higher cause, the through me is going to happen. And the through me is going to be through me, through you, but also through the collective. And so that a movement begins that's bigger than any one person. So life can be happening at any time on any of these levels. We can go through it and go, life is really happening to me this week. Or maybe life is happening by me. I'm exhausted. Or life is happening through me. And finally, we lead to life is happening as me. And this is the Christ consciousness that Jesus demonstrated. He said, believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. He said, when you're seeing the Father, when you're seeing me, you're seeing the Father. He was fully manifesting and enshrining, enfolding, being the Christ consciousness. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. And so we move to the as me. And this is a place where there is no separation, there is no duality, there is only divine love. One of my favorite songs, one of my favorite chants is, the words are, one day I will see you, my Lord. One day I will see your love and see your light and see your oneness one day. And the next verse is, one day I will know you, my Lord. I'll know your love, I'll know your light, and I'll know your oneness. And the last is, one day I will be you. I will be your love, I will be your light, and I will be your oneness one day. So this month, we are observing what it means to be an instrument of God. And answering the call means being willing for something to emerge in us that is bigger than me or you, that is bigger than us. When you look at a situation happening in the world, the tendency might be to fall into victim consciousness where there's nothing we can do, but the truth is we're not victims. We can take action, we can join others, we can move to by me, to me, by me, through me, and as me. Because you are the hands, you are the voice, you are the heart of spirit on earth. And all that you are is a blessing to the world, and you are needed, because as you awaken, you lift us all. Amen.
We come now